On a crowded airport runway, a police officer accused a black soldier of being a fraud, ordering him to strip off his uniform in front of everyone. With a gun aimed at his head, the crowd froze, tension rising as racial hatred fueled the standoff. But the next moment changed everything, turning humiliation into revelation and exposing the true meaning of strength, dignity, and justice. If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. Subscribe to Black Battles and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest powerful stories. The afternoon sun beat down on the busy airport runway, where travelers hurried to catch flights and staff worked tirelessly to keep operations running smoothly. Among the commotion stood Major Darius Boone, dressed in his crisp military camouflage, waiting calmly near the terminal gate. His presence was quiet yet commanding. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had faced far greater dangers than the bustle of an airport. But not everyone saw him that way. Officer Rick Holstead, a veteran cop with a reputation for arrogance and a short temper, narrowed his eyes the moment they landed on Darius. To Rick, the uniform wasn't a badge of honor, it was a provocation. His distrust quickly spiraled into open hostility. Striding forward with heavy steps, Rick barked out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Hey you! Where'd you get that uniform? You think you can just walk around here pretending to be a soldier?" The crowd froze, startled by his tone. Conversations died mid-sentence, and dozens of curious eyes turned toward the confrontation. Evan Lutz, Rick's rookie partner, shifted uneasily. Maybe we should just check his ID first, sir," he whispered, but Rick waved him off with a glare. "No real soldier just strolls in here without showing papers," Rick growled, stepping closer to Darius. His hand hovered near his holster, the implication clear. "Take off that uniform right now or I'll make sure you regret ever putting it on." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some passengers clutched their bags tighter, and others pulled out their phones to record. Through it all, Darius remained composed, his eyes steady, his body unmoving. He didn't flinch at the insult, nor at the threat of violence. His silence only seemed to infuriate Rick further. The tension was unbearable. A police officer's authority clashed with a soldier's dignity, and the crowd could sense that something far more dangerous was about to erupt. And in that charged silence, everyone waited, wondering who would make the next move. The runway had grown eerily quiet. What had begun as a routine afternoon was now unfolding into a tense standoff. Officer Rick Holstead stood face-to-face with Major Darius Boone, his voice rising louder, echoing across the terminal. "You're not fooling anyone," Rick shouted, pointing directly at Darius's chest. "Real soldiers don't hide behind costumes. Strip that uniform off, right here, right now," the crowd gasped. A woman covered her child's eyes. An elderly man muttered under his breath, "This is wrong. This isn't how you treat someone in uniform." Yet, fear kept most silent, their phones raised as they recorded every second of the scene. Evan Lutz, the rookie officer, swallowed hard, his nerves showing. "Officer Holstead, please. Maybe we should slow down. This doesn't feel right," but Rick snapped back, his temper boiling over. "Don't you dare question me, Lutz. This man's a fraud." "I'll prove it." His hand moved, quick and decisive, drawing his pistol in one motion. He raised it high, aiming squarely at Darius's head. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Mothers clutched their children. A suitcase toppled to the ground as someone stumbled back. The metallic click of the weapon being cocked sent a chill through the air. "Take it off!" Rick demanded, his voice venomous. "You don't deserve that uniform." "You're mocking every soldier who died for it." Darius finally lifted his gaze, eyes sharp yet calm. His jaw tightened, but his voice never wavered. "I have bled for this country. I've buried brothers in arms who wore this same uniform. Do not tell me I don't deserve it." For a moment, silence fell. The crowd hung on his every word. But instead of shame, Rick smirked, his arrogance swelling. "You survive combat? Don't make me laugh," Rick sneered, stepping forward. Then, with a burst of aggression, he shoved Darius hard in the chest. Darius didn't stumble. He stood rooted, unflinching, his stillness more powerful than any outburst could have been. The crowd shifted uneasily, their disbelief turning into anger. Something dark and irreversible was building, and everyone could feel it. The breaking point was near. The runway felt like a stage. Every eye fixed on the confrontation between Officer Rick Holstead and Major Darius Boone. The tension was unbearable, each second stretched into eternity. Rick's gun gleamed in the afternoon light, its cold barrel only inches from Darius's face. Yet Darius didn't move. His posture was rigid, his expression calm, his silence unshakable. That calmness seemed to enrage Rick more than open defiance ever could. "Why don't you fight back, huh?" Rick taunted, circling him like a predator. "Isn't that what soldiers are supposed to do? Or are you afraid I'll expose you for the fraud you are?" The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some whispered in disbelief, others voiced frustration. A passenger muttered, "This isn't right. He's not resisting, why push him further?" Another replied, "Because he's enjoying the power. Look at him!" Finally, Darius broke his silence. His voice was deep, steady, and carried the weight of truth. "I have nothing to prove to you," he said firmly. This uniform was not bought. It was earned through blood, sacrifice, and scars you could never imagine. The words cut through the chaos like a blade. For a moment, even the onlookers forgot to breathe. Rick's eyes narrowed, his authority challenged in front of the crowd. "You think words are going to save you?" Rick snapped back. His hand pressed harder against Darius's chest, then shoved him again, this time with more force. Darius didn't flinch. He remained unmoved, his boots rooted to the ground, his gaze unbroken. That unyielding strength, that refusal to bend or lash out, sent a ripple through the crowd. Some began recording closer. Others whispered, "He's not afraid, he's stronger than him." But Rick only grew more reckless, his desperation bleeding into every action. His finger tightened near the trigger and the situation teetered on the edge of disaster. Evan Lutz, torn between loyalty to his partner and horror at what he was witnessing, whispered frantically, "This has gone too far!" The crowd's unease turned to dread. One wrong move, one pull of a trigger, and the runway would turn into a crime scene. The tension on the runway had reached a breaking point. Officer Rick Holstead's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger, while Major Darius Boone stood firm, calm as stone. The crowd held its breath, torn between fear and outrage. One wrong twitch, and disaster would unfold before their eyes. Then came the sound that changed everything. At first, it was a faint vibration in the air, a deep, rhythmic rumble. Heads turned upward as the noise grew louder, unmistakable. The sky split with the thunder of helicopter blades. Gasps spread through the crowd. "What's happening?" one passenger whispered, shielding his eyes from the glare. Another voice cut through the murmurs. Those are Navy SEALs!" The black helicopters descended with authority, dust and wind whipping across the runway. Within seconds, heavily armed SEALs rappelled down, moving with lethal precision. Their boots hit the ground, and without hesitation, they advanced toward Darius. Rick stiffened, his confidence faltering. He expected them to back him up, or at least question Darius. But what happened next shattered him. The SEALs stopped in formation, snapping into a flawless salute. SEAL Commander, booming voice. "Major Darius Boone, sir." The crowd erupted in shock. The man Rick had mocked and humiliated was not an imposter, not a pretender. He was the commanding officer of the very soldiers now surrounding them. Rick's face drained of color. His arrogance melted into disbelief. What are you doing? He can't be—" His words faltered under the weight of the truth. The SEALs' weapons shifted, forming a tight perimeter around Rick. Muzzle flashes of polished steel glinted in the sunlight, each barrel aimed directly at the officer who seconds ago thought he was in control. For the first time, Rick's bravado cracked. His hands trembled slightly as he barked weakly, "I'm the law here! Put those guns down!" But no one listened. The power had shifted, and everyone, officers, passengers, soldiers alike, knew it. The predator had just become the prey. The runway was silent except for the steady hum of the helicopters overhead. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation. Officer Rick Holstead, gun in hand, surrounded by a ring of Navy SEALs who stood unwavering, their rifles trained on him. The balance of power had shifted so suddenly that the crowd could hardly process it. Major Darius Boone did not move. His posture remained calm, dignified, his presence commanding more authority than any badge ever could. His silence was louder than Rick's shouts, and that silence unnerved the officer more than any threat could have. Rick's rookie partner, Evan Lutz, stepped forward cautiously. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "Rick, put the gun down! We're outnumbered. This isn't right." But Rick's pride, swollen with rage and humiliation, refused to yield. He spat at the ground and barked back, "Stay out of this, Lutz! He's a liar! A fraud in uniform! None of this changes that," the crowd murmured in disbelief. Some passengers raised their phones higher, recording every second. The image of a police officer threatening a decorated major was already searing into their minds and their cameras. Then, with quiet strength, Darius finally spoke. His voice carried like steel cutting through the air. "I earned this uniform through sacrifice, through blood, through loyalty. You mocked it. You belittled it. But the truth has a way of standing taller than lies." The SEALs tightened their formation, two of them moving closer to Rick, ready to strike. Rick's mask of control cracked. His finger twitched nervously against the trigger as he looked around, realizing the eyes of hundreds, civilians and soldiers alike, were fixed on him. For the first time, he understood. He was not in control. "Respect me." "I'm a police officer!" Rick shouted desperately, his voice breaking, no longer commanding but pleading. No one answered, and in that silence, his authority collapsed like a crumbling wall. The silence on the runway stretched unbearably. Rick Holstead still clutched his weapon, though his hand shook under the crushing weight of reality. His authority had withered. His bravado was nothing but a hollow echo. The Navy SEALs moved with calculated precision, two of them stepping forward, eyes sharp, movements deliberate. With a single nod from their commander, the SEALs surged. In less than a heartbeat, Rick was disarmed, his gun wrenched from his hand. His wrists were twisted behind his back, zip ties tightening around them with brutal finality. His cry of pain mixed with humiliation as his knees buckled, forcing him down before the very man he had tried to disgrace. The crowd gasped, phones recording, whispers rippling like waves. Some onlookers smiled with relief, others shook their heads at the disgrace of a man who had let hate blind his judgment. Rick's partner, Evan Lutz, stood frozen, torn between loyalty and shame. He lowered his gaze, unable to meet Darius's eyes. Major Darius Boone remained composed, his presence unshaken. He stepped forward, his boots steady against the tarmac, his shadow falling over Rick. Yet there was no gloating in his face, no satisfaction in his enemy's fall. Instead, Darius spoke with quiet strength. "Respect is not a uniform. It is not a badge. It is not given by fear. It is earned through honor." His voice carried across the runway, reaching every ear, embedding itself in every conscience. He paused, then added, his tone heavier with truth. "You aimed your weapon at me, not because of what I did, but because of what I am. That is the sickness we must fight, not with bullets, but with courage, restraint, and dignity." The weight of his words silenced the crowd. Even the SEALs, hardened warriors of countless battles, seemed moved by the calm fire in his message. Rick, bound and humiliated, tried once more to salvage pride. "I'm still an officer. I deserve respect." But no one answered. Respect had already been claimed by the man standing tall, not the one kneeling in disgrace. The helicopters still churned the air above, but the chaos on the runway had settled into silence. Officer Rick Holstead knelt, bound and broken, his defiance drained. The crowd's shock had shifted into reflection. They had witnessed a truth no lens could fully capture. Some held their phones high, still recording, while others lowered them, realizing the moment deserved more than digital proof. It demanded respect. Major Darius Boone stood at the center of it all. Dust swirled around him, but his posture remained unshaken. His calm presence carried more weight than the dozens of rifles trained moments ago. He did not smile at his adversary's downfall, nor bask in the vindication that had silenced Rick's hate. Instead, he lifted his gaze to the people who had been frozen in fear and doubt. Strength, Darius began, his voice steady but resonant, is not measured by the power to pull a trigger. It is measured by the courage to hold your fire when the world dares you to use it. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the SEALs, soldiers hardened by war, stood straighter, their eyes fixed on their commanding officer, as if he were speaking to them as much as to the civilians. I fight battles overseas, he continued, his tone deepening. But there are battles here too, battles of prejudice, of judgment, of blind hatred. And those battles can wound deeper than any bullet. You've all seen it today. Several in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A flight attendant bit her lip, guilt washing over her face. An airport guard who had stood frozen earlier lowered his head. They had all been bystanders, watching a man humiliated until truth arrived with the sound of helicopter blades. Darius's eyes swept across them, piercing yet forgiving. Silence is a choice. Fear is a choice. But dignity, that is something no one can strip away unless you surrender it. Today I chose not to. The words struck like a hammer against the walls of apathy. Murmurs rippled. Some passengers whispered to one another, while others wiped tears they hadn't. Realized were falling. Rick Holstead, kneeling in defeat, muttered bitterly, "You think this changes anything? People will always see what they want." Darius crouched slightly, his voice firm but calm. Maybe, but people also remember moments that shake them awake. And today, you've become the example of what power without respect looks like. That is your legacy. Mine will be different. With that, he rose again, his presence towering. The SEALs moved to escort him, but Darius paused. Turning once more toward the civilians gathered, "Never forget," he said, "that the uniform, whether a soldier's or an officer's, deserves honor, not because of its fabric, but because of the sacrifice behind it. Respect the person before you judge the cloth." The runway seemed to exhale, a collective release of the tension that had bound it. The SEALs guided Darius toward the waiting helicopter. As he climbed aboard, the wind from the rotors whipped across the faces of those watching. He did not look back with anger nor triumph. He left with the calm dignity of a man who had fought 2 battles in one day and won them both. Not with weapons, but with restraint, honor, and truth. As the helicopters lifted into the sky, the crowd remained rooted, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. For some, it was a moment of shame. For others, a spark of inspiration. For all, it was unforgettable. The name Major Darius Boone would not leave their minds. Not as a victim, not even as a hero, but as a man who had shown them the true meaning of strength in the face of hate. And long after the sound of rotor blades faded, his words echoed in the silence. True strength lies in the dignity you refuse to surrender.